Hey, what's going on, guys? Thank you for joining me for today's video, which is one that I don't normally like to leave this late into January. Years prior, I'd probably have this video out a little bit sooner, but through the start of January, I was actually away, so I had to push this video back a little bit, but finally getting around to doing my top 10 favorite horror movies from the year 2025. Obviously, a pretty straightforward video, just listing my top 10 personal favorite horror movies that I checked out through the year 2025. This is a list personal to me and my opinions and personal taste, so this isn't a definitive list, just putting that out there because I'll always get these comments saying where's this. It's alright that you have personal favorites, but if it's not on my list, it's just personal taste, don't take any offense. But as usual, just before I get into listing my actual top 10, I'm going to try and keep this short and sharp. I'm just going to tell you how many horror movies I watched through 2025, from the year 2025 as well, and then just my thoughts on the year overall for the horror movies that we got. So first of all, how many horror movies did I watch in 2025? I managed to watch 68. Recently I've had a couple of people ask me, like, how many horror movies should you be watching in a year to sort of cover all bases? Me personally, I've always thought to myself, if I can at least watch 50, because if you're just watching like 50, I feel like you are covering all bases, you know, the mainstream popular ones, a few hidden gems, finding stuff yourself. I feel like 50 is sort of the minimum for myself personally, but it all comes down to, you know, personal taste and timing and how much time you're willing to dedicate to checking out these movies. So I don't think there really is an answer, but for me, I feel like 50 is a minimum for myself. But getting into my thoughts of the horror movies and just, you know, thoughts on the year in general, it's a bit of a weird one because, as always, through every list that I do in, you know, my top 10s and everything, I really like my top 10. I think it's a very, very solid top 10. It's personal to me. I enjoy it. And especially the top half of my top 10, I would say like my top 2 could make a case as like being some of my favorites from the decade, for example. But looking at the year overall, I think it's above average, but it was also nothing that like really blew me away. It was better than 2023. I think 2023 has been the weakest year from the 2020s so far. It was definitely better than that, but it was still just nothing that like really blew me away. Looking at it overall, it's above average. I think it's still solid enough, but it just sort of left me going, like by the end of it. So a bit of a weird one, caught in the middle, going like, yeah, I really like my list, obviously, and especially like the top half and especially my top 2 if I'm really breaking it down, but overall, yeah, it was solid enough. So I'm going to try and, as I said, keep this intro short and sharp. I might as well get into listing my top 10 now. Thank you for sitting through this intro. Let's get into it, starting off with my number 10. So starting off at my number 10, I have the movie Strange Harvest. This movie's basically a faux documentary, mockumentary, whatever you want to call it, about a film crew doing a piece on a serial killer known as Mr. Shiny. Mr. Shiny started his murders back in the 90s, just off the top of my head, something like that. He disappeared for a while and he's recently re-emerged, and now this crew is doing interviews with detectives and police following the process of his murders and trying to find him, track him down, and that's basically the gist of this movie. This is the most realistic horror, faux documentary, mockumentary, whatever you want to call it, that I've seen in a while. This was directed by one of the directors that did Grave Encounters, just off the top of my head. I think his name's Stuart Ortiz, I think that's him. And yeah, they did a really good job at making this feel really grounded and realistic for the most part. I'll get into that as I go. It feels like you're watching one of those true crime documentaries that like Netflix is dropping all the time now, but it feels way more gory and brutal as well. They definitely don't hold back on showing the victims post-murder and the gore and the brutality of it all, so I found that to be really impactful. Without spoiling, it does go into a more fantastical direction as the movie goes, but for me personally, I don't think they overplayed it to a point where it takes you out of the movie, or at least it didn't take me out of the movie. I can definitely see people going like, oh, what, that was such a, you know, change of pace and, you know, such a sharp turn, and you know, them not enjoying it. But if it does go in a direction that you prefer less, I feel like majority of the movie up until that point has done a very good job with its story and presentation, reeling you in and keeping you enthralled with the mystery and like trying to capture this Mr. Shiny antagonist. So getting to a rating for Strange Harvest, going to try and keep this one short and sharp. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Coming in at my number 9, I have a movie called Marshmallow, basically about this quiet, reserved kid who mostly keeps to himself, is sent off to a summer camp by his parents because of those reasons. They just want to get him out there a little bit more. But while at this summer camp, the group are told about this campfire legend of this doctor who used to do these experiments back in the day, and now he wanders the woods looking for new victims. And for the most part, early on it's just a campfire story, but as the movie goes on, they start to realize this story might be a little bit too real. And I'll leave the plot there for Marshmallow. Getting into this one, this is probably my pick for the underseen hidden gem of the year. I heard a basic plot description of this movie and I'm like, sounds interesting, I'll check it out. And it genuinely floored me. Like, I had a great time watching this movie. I loved the camp setting. It just felt really cool and lived in, and I loved the whole vibe of it. I really liked the campfire story and legend of the Doctor. They did a really good job as building it as something really creepy and as a genuine threat to these kids, and it felt like a real campfire story that you would share amongst friends or hear out and about while camping, and really did a good job at feeling like a real urban legend. The child cast did an extremely good job in this movie, especially because, like I said, this isn't a big high budget mainstream horror film, so sometimes when these films are bringing in child actors, it can definitely be a little bit iffy, but the child cast did a genuine good job all round, especially our lead. I thought he was really good. In this movie there are 2 twists or reveals, whatever you want to call them, and I thought both of them were really solid. One I do like more than the other, but neither of them took me out or lost me or anything like that. I thought for the most part they were pretty well executed. I wish this movie was a little bit more brutal, if I'm getting nitpicky. When I'm talking about brutal, I'd probably say more visually brutal, because the concept of a doctor going around taking kids for experiments, and I'm talking about genuine kids, these aren't teenagers, these are kids around the age of 10, 11, 12, so that is kind of brutal to think about. But I wish it was just a little bit more visually brutal with maybe some gore or something like that. I don't know, I'm just a sick fuck. But this movie is so much more than what it seems to be on surface level. You hear it in a summer camp and you're like, okay, maybe a basic sort of slasher, but it's so much more than that. Getting to a rating for Marshmallow, I'm also going to give this one an 8 out of 10. Coming in at my number 8, I have the movie Final Destination Bloodlines. The plot for this one is actually a little bit different to what we've previously had in the Final Destination franchise. This movie actually opens in the, I could be wrong here, but I want to say 50s, 60s, something like that. And like all Final Destinations do, it opens with a tragedy, but instead of staying back in the 50s and 60s or whatever it was with the survivors, we actually do a time jump to our characters that we're following here. And what Death is basically doing is following the bloodline of the survivor and picking off the ancestors that should never actually have been here, and essentially pruning the branches of the family tree that were never meant to be. That's basically the plot that we have here for Final Destination Bloodlines. First of all, I feel like this was 2026's version of Evil Dead Rise, in terms of when Evil Dead Rise came out last year, year before, something like that. I thought that movie got way overhyped, way overrated. That movie got sucked off. It was still really good, it made my top 10, but I thought it got way overhyped. That's sort of my thoughts on Final Destination Bloodlines. Obviously I still really like it, it's my number 8, but I thought this movie got way overhyped, but still really good. I just wanted to quickly clear that up. This movie is just purely so much fun. Final Destination is a franchise where I'm sort of in the camp of saying it's hard to fuck it up. I've had people disagree with me, and most of the time they bring up the example of Final Destination 4, which isn't the greatest, and sure, I agree, but I feel like, Final Destination is honestly one of the most consistent horror franchises out there, and sure, the idea can be played out, but as long as you keep a new Final Destination movie fun, gory, creative with the kills, you should be mostly pretty good. And this one did all of that and more, like I said in the plot description, by switching up the formula slightly, by having Death follow a bloodline. I thought that change was unique enough and fresh enough to keep this a little bit more interesting instead of being played out. And I also like that the switch up of following a bloodline actually still plays into the previous installments that we've had in the franchise. If you've seen the movie, you're going to know what I'm talking about. But before I wrap up my thoughts on this one, also a great send-off and tribute to Tony Todd, who not only was a staple of the Final Destination franchise, but a staple in the horror genre. So rest in peace, Tony Todd. Final Destination Bloodlines. Like I said, I feel like this movie was overrated as fuck from this year, but still really solid, so I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Getting into my number 7, which is a movie I know a lot of people are going to be saying should be higher on my list. But with that being said as well, I feel like recently I've also heard a lot of people call this one overrated, so I guess it really depends on where you sit on the fence with this one. But my number 7 goes to Ryan Coogler's Sinners. The plot for this one, these two twin brothers return to their hometown after spending some time off in the city. Their goal is to open essentially a club to try and make a little bit of money while also having somewhere for the black community to get together, hang out, spend time, what have you. Through the first half of this movie, we're introduced to a whole stack of characters, but another one who also plays a pivotal role is their cousin Sammy, who is hired to perform the blues, play his guitar, sing some songs. It's also essentially a juke joint, this club, and music does play a massive part in the movie as well. But as we get into the swing of things and the club opens and whatever, it is approached by a group of strangers who want to be welcomed in and come inside. And I don't think it's a spoiler at this point, but the group of strangers also happens to be vampires. So getting into my thoughts of this one, there is so much to like about this movie. That plot description was very basic. The movie is so much deeper than that, but I would be talking for days if I was like really breaking it down. There is so much to like about this movie, to the point where I can't really think of many faults, which you might be saying, why is it not higher on your list then? I think it's just one of those things where the remaining films yet to come I just happen to like more, and, personal taste and, things like that. But this movie has a great ensemble cast. I definitely want to highlight Michael B. Jordan, who plays the dual role of twins, and it's almost like there are two different actors there. He does such a good job at making them have their own personalities and characteristics, and the effects of having them both there on screen at the same time. It's very seamless. So great performance there by Michael B. Jordan. I love the vampire lore and how they're represented and depicted in this movie, and I guess what they mean to this movie and in the world that is created in this film. The music in this movie is incredible. It's almost like a musical in disguise. It's fantastic. And as I said, it obviously also plays a massive factor in the storyline. The themes in this movie, just in general, culture, legacy, leaving a life behind for something that you want more. The character Sammy's a great example. He grew up in the church, and going out to this club and being in this environment is something that, what the title says, would essentially be a sin in his life, but it's just something that he wants more. There are so many themes, and they were just a short amount to list there. This movie is something to study and break down, and it has so much to say, and I could ramble on for so long about this movie. Two of the most incredible scenes of the year are from this film. The scene that I just call the history of music, a one-shot take of going through different time periods and styles of music throughout the decades and centuries and things like that. And then also the final scene, without spoiling what the final scene is, but where a character, during what I guess you would call the epilogue of the film, says to another character, something along the lines of, "Did that night mean as much for you as it did for me?" And that is just so impactful, again, to the themes and what's going on in this story. I could talk about Sinners all day, because this is definitely one of the movies on this list where you could just break it down forever, but I don't have the time to do that. So getting into a rating for Sinners, at the moment, I'm going to be giving it an 8.5 out of 10. Coming in at my number 6 is the movie Companion. In this film, we have a couple, Iris and Josh, played by Sophie Thatcher and Jack Quaid, who take this trip off to this lake cabin with a group of friends where shit goes wrong. And I'm basically just going to leave it there, because there is a very early reveal in this movie where, if you haven't seen this film, maybe that reveal hasn't been spoiled for you, so I'm just going to leave it there. Even though the reveal in this movie was spoiled for me going into it, I still managed to have a blast with this movie. Honestly, I feel like the marketing was this movie's own worst enemy, and I said the same thing about Abigail from last year or the year before. If the movie Abigail, in the marketing, didn't spoil that Abigail was a vampire, that movie would have been so much more impactful. And I feel like it's the same thing here. If the posters and trailers and everything didn't give too much away about the reveal for Companion, I feel like it would have hit on a whole nother level. But with that being said, this movie was just still so much fun. Definitely up there as one of the more fun films, like I said, with Final Destination Bloodlines. Quirky is probably the best way to describe this movie, but it's also very charming, funny, brutal when it needs to be. Just overall, this movie was really entertaining. Again, without going into spoilers, so I'm going to try and word this the best way I can. The reveal of what's going on in this movie, the reveal that we get very early on, we've had a lot of horror movies like this recently, especially over the past year or two. But normally, the reveal to this movie is depicted as the film's antagonist. But it was a nice change of pace to set it as the protagonist for this film, and I found that refreshing and a nice change of pace. But again, just going to leave it there because I don't want to give too much away just in case you haven't seen this movie, and I feel like I've covered all my thoughts anyway. So Companion, I'm going to give this one also an 8.5 out of 10. Coming in at my number 5 is The Black Phone 2. Now obviously this is going to be a sequel to the first Black Phone movie, so again we're following the brother and sister duo of Finney and Gwen. This time the focus is taken off Finney as a main character, and Gwen is now a main character in this movie. And she's having these dreams or visions, whatever you want to call them, of the events that had taken place in the first movie. But she's also having these feelings like the grabber isn't done, and she's having these nightmares of some other kids that may have fallen victim to the grabber at some point in the timeline. And it's drawing her into this camp that her mum once upon a time was a counsellor at. And because of that reason, Gwen, Finney, and a friend of theirs take up jobs as counsellors at this camp so they can try and figure out what's going on while they're there. Upon arrival, a snowstorm hits, so none of the kids actually arrive, and they're sort of the only ones there with the people that own the camp. But during this time, they're trying to unravel the mystery of the connection between the grabber, this camp, and the other kids that Gwen is dreaming about or having nightmares about. So that's the plot for this one. Going into this movie, I was more curious than hyped for it because the first Black Phone movie ends with such a full stop ending. It's kind of like, where do you go from here? My prediction was that the Black Phone 2 was actually going to be a prequel, but I was wrong, and I was super surprised by this movie. The marketing and trailers for this one, sort of showed us that it was going a Nightmare on Elm Street route, which I was super excited for. Like, my excitement skyrocketed through the roof when I saw that. Like, we just haven't had anything Nightmare on Elm Street in so long. I'm just like, I don't care if another franchise rips it off, just give it to me. I'll take 20 of these without even checking out this movie. Acting all around in this movie was great. Ethan Hawke as the grabber, fantastic again. I always highlight Mason Thames as a great up-and-coming child actor, which you can't really call him a child actor anymore because he's older than that. But I thought he was incredible in the first Black Phone, does a great job here again. But the actress that plays his sister Gwen, I'm blanking on her name. I think it's Madeline McGraw. Don't come at me if I'm wrong, but let me know what her name is in the comments. She was incredible. Best child performance of the year, like really fucking good. The dream sequences in this movie and how they looked, incredible. Scott Derrickson, the director, is very well known for using like a Super 8 style in his films, whether it's Sinister or, whatever. He does it here in this movie again. Like, the dreams have like this Super 8 look to them, and it's really cool how it, like, whenever you see that pop up, you go, okay, I'm in a dream right now, and you're expecting something scary or fantastical to happen, and I really enjoyed that. The winter snow setting was also really pleasant, again taking place in a summer camp. Like I said with Marshmallow, I like summer camp settings, I'll take it. The grabber is even scarier in this movie, and you can put that down to the fact that he's got this decaying, rotting look to him because, spoiler alert, he died at the end of the first Black Phone movie. But he also has these supernatural abilities this time around. Like, I just found him to be really creepy in this one. The final showdown, there definitely are questions within that final showdown sequence, or maybe like holes that pop up when you start to question how certain things happen. Again, I'm trying not to spoil stuff, but maybe some plot holes there and things that do leave question marks. But the movie was just such a pleasant surprise, and I had so much enjoyment watching this movie where I'm willing to let things slide with that final sequence and where questions do pop up. And it did a great job at not only making another good movie, but being a worthy sequel. Like the way that they tie it into the first movie, it feels warranted as a sequel, and I really hope they can make a franchise out of these two Black Phone movies that they've done so far. Again, keeping on pattern, I'm going to give this one an 8.5 out of 10. Getting into my number 4, here we have the movie Weapons. The plot for this one is basically about a town trying to pick up the pieces, put blame towards someone, figure out the mystery of this classroom of kids who one night, all at the same time, woke up, got out of bed, ran out the house, and they have never been seen again. And now we're following a group of different characters from a group of different perspectives, trying to figure out this mystery and what's going on. And the movie goes on from there. I'm going to try and just leave it there with the plot description. This was my most rewatched horror movie of 2025, to a point where I possibly got a little bit burnt out from this movie, because I checked it out 4 times and 3 of the viewings were very, very close together. And even upon rewatches, especially the last time I checked out this movie, there were a few holes in the plot and story that I did manage to find. But the movie balanced elements so well and just made the movie so interesting and entertaining in so many different ways that I'm happy to waiver a few of the faults that I ended up finding in the movie the last time I watched it. But with all that being said, great mystery. The chapter non-linear storytelling and format of this movie, which I didn't really get into, I found that to be really interesting. Creepy, scary. I think some of the best jump scares and frights of the year are from this movie, and director Zach Gregory did that with me when he did his last movie, Barbarian. Really creepy moments in that film as well. But this movie is also like surprisingly funny. Like, I found myself laughing out loud at plenty of times in this film. Most people were taken out by the very ending of this film and sort of the last sequence. Tone-wise, it's the funniest part of this movie, and I really liked it. Like, I was verbally out loud cackling the first time I watched this movie with that ending. I thought it was really funny. But moving on, another great ensemble cast with this movie, who all do a really, really great job. There's more I want to talk about, but I think the things that I want to talk about give a little bit too much away for those who haven't seen this movie, so I'm going to keep it to myself, and maybe further down the track I can break down some of those things that I like. But number 4 is going to Weapons, again keeping up with the 8.5s out of 10. Moving on and getting into my top 3, and coming in at my number 3 spot might actually surprise a few people. Here I have the movie Dangerous Animals. The plot for this movie is we have a serial killer living on the beaches of Australia, finding his victims, but unlike a typical slasher where he's taking them out in a typical slasher fashion, he actually takes them onto his boat, and he's essentially making shark snuff films. He's feeding them to sharks and filming it for his own collection. Getting into my thoughts of this one, firstly, this movie made me realise how trusted and consistent the director Sean Burns is, especially in the horror genre. Previous work that he's done is The Loved Ones and The Devil's Candy. This is actually only his 3rd horror movie, but all 3 are like consistently good, so I really hope he does more horror movies soon, rather than later. I wasn't expecting much from this movie going into it, and granted, there wasn't much in terms of like completely reinventing the wheel with this movie, but it was fresh enough, and I was completely locked into this movie. I was entertained from start to finish and had so much fun with it. It's a popcorn flick, but in the best way possible. You have a charismatic killer who has a unique method of killing people, and his brain and how he's like thinking and how he wants to do it, and his backstory and all that was cool and entertaining. He's played perfectly by Jai Courtney, where again he comes across as charismatic, funny at times, and even, dare I say, charming. You've got a badass final girl, which also is really cool in a movie like this one. This movie was like fun, tense, thrilling, funny at times, like I said. I haven't focused too much on the shark stuff through this review, but all of that was fantastic too. Very tense, like when these bodies are hitting the water and there are sharks underneath, like you hold your breath. And this movie being Australian as well, and I guess watching it from an Australian eye, hearing the lingo and dialogue and seeing locations that I'm familiar with, it was also really cool. So this one, I might actually surprise a few people with my rating, but we're finally getting into the 9s. I'm giving Dangerous Animals a 9 out of 10. Coming in at my number 2, and no pun intended here, but I have the movie Together. The plot for this one is we have a couple, played by real life couple Dave Franco and Alison Brie, who move into this new house together. Upon arrival, their relationship is already not on the smoothest waters. They're having a bit of problems there. He's been pulled away from everything that he's comfortable with and sort of knows, and his routine. They've moved here because she has a job that's now closer to where they're living. And there's other factors as well that, like I said, put their relationship on less smooth waters. But after some shit goes down upon arrival, again, staying away from spoilers and whatever, there is a force that is forced upon them, drawing them together to some body horror consequences, and I'll leave the plot description there. This movie on paper was possibly the most appealing for me plot and theme-wise coming into 2025. Like, when I heard about a basic plot for this movie, saw some still images, especially when the trailer dropped, I'm like, yes, this is the type of movie that's right up my alley, and I'm happy that it didn't let me down. Body horror with deeper themes, the nature aesthetic, something about a force of nature doing something that almost isn't natural, like doing something unnatural. I find that to be really, intriguing and honestly kind of creepy. Something about something you can't control but is on Earth making you do something that you shouldn't be doing. I find that pretty creepy. This movie was brutal, gross. It made me squirm like more than a handful of times. It was also surprisingly funny when it needed to be, deep with its themes and meaning, like I said. This would be a wary one, I would say, to watch with a partner. I think it all depends on how you see relationships, or your own relationship, I guess, but that's me just playing relationship coach, I don't fucking know. I had my eyes like glued on this screen from like start to finish. Like I said, I was squirming, laughing, gasping, giggling at points, like I said, because it is surprisingly funny when it needs to be. Many people had problems with the very end of this movie, and when I say very end, I literally mean the final shot of this film. And yes, I kind of have a direction I would have preferred, but with that being said, I was also fully content with how this movie ended. Like, I did not like it, but there is a version that other people have brought up where I'm like, yeah, that would have been cooler, and I'm just going to call it the Substance version. If you saw the Substance from last year, hopefully you can connect the dots on the direction I thought would have been cooler, but like I said, no major issue. I didn't dislike the final shot. Overall, as I said, this is a movie that appealed to me, and I'm so happy it like landed pretty much perfect with me. I'm going to give Together a 9.5 out of 10. And coming in as my favourite horror movie from the year 2025, here I have the film Bring Her Back by the young up-and-coming Australian directors, the Philippou brothers. The plot for this movie, you have stepbrother and sister who are taken into foster care after their father has passed away by this seemingly nice lady at first, very eccentric. They move into her house with her and her nephew, who she's taking care of, and the nephew is creepy and weird as fuck as well. But as the movie goes on, I know I keep saying this through all my plot descriptions, but not everything is as it seems. I keep saying that because I'm trying to keep it minimal for those who haven't seen these movies and not give too much away. But getting into my thoughts of Bring Her Back and why it's my favourite horror movie of 2025, the directors, the Philippou brothers, had my favourite horror movie of 2023 with their debut film Talk to Me. I was very impressed by that movie. Granted, looking back, like I said in the intro to this video, 2023 was not the greatest standard of horror movies in general. But even looking back now, like, if I was to think of my favourite horror movie from that year, I'm not sure if it would still be my number one. But granted, still really like that movie. But I do think Bring Her Back is the better of the two that they've done so far. I like that as directors, they're not afraid to make a dark, bleak, depressing movie where there almost seemingly isn't a light at the end of the tunnel. And if there is a light, it's miles away and it's a hell of a trek to get there. It's almost like they sit you in a chair and go, okay, be prepared to feel shitty and depressed for 2 hours. Go. And you watch these movies and they just fucking hit on another level. This movie is grim. I feel bad for literally every character in this movie, and I do mean every character, even our antagonist in this film, which is a sign of a well-written character, because you can understand the antagonist's motive. Yes, they're going about it the complete wrong way, but you understand why they're trying to do this, and it's heartbreaking when you really break it down. You feel for them and you understand, but again, it's a well-written character where you've got the pendulum going, okay, this is really wrong, but I can see their point of view. But like I said, my heart breaks for literally every character in this movie, and the stepbrother and sister combo is really the heart of this film, and in particular, the stepbrother, who is our main character essentially. You feel for him, like he cannot fucking catch a break in this movie. Like, even just thinking back on it now, like I'm struggling to find the words because he just cannot catch a break. That's the only way to put it. You feel terrible for him. You got a great antagonist role played by Sally Hawkins, and again, you can see her loss and her sympathetic side of the character. But again, I've more so focused on that. She is also completely twisted and manipulative, and even when she's not doing something physical, just the way she talks to certain characters and the way she twists things in their mind and things like that, it makes you feel physically sick. You're like, this is a rotten person. But again, the pendulum, you understand her point of view to some extent. Yes, going about it the wrong way, but such a well-written character. Very well done. I like that this movie doesn't hold back, especially willing to do certain things that other movies wouldn't. There's a certain part in this movie, again, no spoilers, a little bit over the halfway mark, where it does something where you go, wow, this movie has balls. That's a risk. Not every movie would do that, and not everyone's going to like that choice. But I like it because it really just, again, stamps a mark on you as a viewer, and you go, wow, that is brave to do. This movie is brutal and gory, as you probably would have learnt if you checked out Talk to Me. They're going to go there with the realistic and brutal gore that just feels so grounded, and you're like, ugh, nasty. This movie is horror. You watch this movie and you go, yep, there is no fucking ifs or but about it. This is a horror film. I'm scared. I'm tense. There is like no funny moment in this movie. Just everything is bleak. The only time you'll laugh is just from being that fucking uncomfortable. I'm going to give this movie a 9.5 out of 10. It's very rare I give out a 10, especially for movies that are very new and, you know, I'm still gathering my complete thoughts, but this is so close to a 10, but a 9.5 out of 10 so far for Bring Her Back, my favourite horror movie from the year 2025. Alright, there we go, guys. Thank you for joining me for my list of my top 10 favourite horror movies from the year 2025. Again, sorry that it came out so late into the month of January. I'm sure there was a lot of people watching my channel going, fuck this, guys, normally drop that video by now, how long are we going to wait? But thank you for sitting by, and hopefully you guys check out this video and enjoy it. Let me know your top 10 favourite horror movies in the comments below. Like I said, we're obviously all not going to have the same lists and different tastes, and hopefully you guys drop a movie that I didn't check out and you put it on my radar, and yeah, it's a movie that I enjoy watching. But thank you for joining me for today's video. I appreciate the support as always. Hopefully it hasn't gone too long, but yeah, I'll see you for another piece of video soon. Thanks for joining me, guys.